Alright, what's going on everyone? Today we're upgrading another Foundation starter deck. On a budget, we're going to use 0 rares, 0 mythics, commons and uncommons only, and we're going to be upgrading the Undead Resurgence deck. Now I don't know where this is located because I'm doing this early. I think they're eventually going to be under the starter deck tab, but today it's here for now. I don't know, but we're going to clone it. We're going to open the clone, and I have to do some I gotta fix mine because of weird stuff with how they added the card. Look, it's a whole weird thing. It's fine, but this deck, oh, it's a weird deck. It's a graveyard deck for sure, but it doesn't know what kind of graveyard deck it wants to be. So we have some like combo-y stuff, right? We have sacrifice a creature, get a counter. This comes back from the graveyard, so they kind of bounce off each other. We have some tribal zombie stuff. Like this wants to recast zombies. We have Death Baron, but of course the problem is there's not a lot of zombies. Look how much of the deck is actually zombies. And another problem with that is these are all the zombies in standard right now. We just haven't had any good tribal zombie sets, so there's not a lot of good tribal zombie cards. So Death Baron is cool, but there's not enough support for the zombie stuff, unfortunately. But then there's the graveyard stuff. We have Threshold, this mills to fill the graveyard. We have Kiora, and I think that's probably the best route because of course there's always graveyard matter stuff. Now I will say, I gotta go back to my decks really quick. I did think about going the Zombify route. In fact, I have it right here. You see big. So the idea with this deck is this is just like all the Reanimator decks in standard that are reanimating Atraxa and Valgavoth, right? Except those are rares and mythics. So we're reanimating Plaka Worm with a Zombify, and this deck is 0 rares. But the problem is there's 2 cards in this deck that are in the starter deck. So we're basically just building an entirely new deck. So even though I think this is cool, I don't think we can really get there without just building an entirely new deck, right? It's just kind of silly. So I'm going to be focusing more on self-mill and threshold. So yeah, let's just do that. Let's start by adding one of my favorite threshold cards that no one talks about. No one plays this, but Mind Whisker. This card has continued to impress me every time I play it. So I talk about this a lot, but a major problem that you have with decks that are trying to do multiple things, like this deck is trying to fill its graveyard and take advantage of that. That means we need stuff that puts stuff in the graveyard and then stuff that benefits from the graveyard being big. And when you have decks that require 2 different kinds of pieces, any card that does both is a huge thumbs up, and this does both. It's a 3-mana 3/2. At the beginning of our upkeep, we surveil 1 that fills the graveyard, and a filter. We get to look at the top card. If we don't want it, it goes into the graveyard, gets us to threshold faster. And then it's a payoff. When we have threshold, all of our opponent's creatures get -1, -0, makes all of their threats less threatening. It's pretty good at slowing them down because we're going to be winning with flyers. We're going to go up to 4 copies of both of these. Our main win condition is going to be getting these flyers and just attacking. We have Kiora and stuff as well. And this just completely neutering the opponent. By the way, it stacks, right? If we have 2 of them, they get -2, -0. It's pretty good. This, on the other hand, 4-mana 3/4 is whatever. I mean, they're both, the bodies on these are both kind of whatever. 3-mana 3/2 is whatever. 4-mana 3/4 is whatever. Menace is fine. Threshold, it becomes a 5/4 Menace, which is fine. A 4-mana 5/4 Menace is it's not Kiora. Kiora putting an 8/8. It's a little bit better. So I like Mind Whisker. The Surveil is huge for filling the graveyard, filtering, very useful. Next, I know that reassembling Skeleton and Hungry Ghoul, when you get them together, is fine. And maybe you could do a sacrifice deck, but even in sacrifice decks, this is never played. And I want to just mill more, so I want to play Marionette. So this is just a 2-mana 1/1. They're both 2-mana 1/1s. What we're trading, being able to return this to the battlefield over and over again for mill 2 and Death Touch, meaning this is like a pseudo removal spell. Once this is on the battlefield, it's going to trade with something, and sometimes it eats a removal spell. If our opponent spends a removal spell on this to get rid of the Death Toucher, I mean, sure, spend your removal spell on my 2-drop, right? That's fine. So they're both kind of weaker creatures, but this is going to help us get the threshold so we can turn on stuff like the Scavenger and the Mind Whisker and Kiora. We can't add more of these, it's rare unfortunately, but I do just want to mill more. Next, I want to go to 4 copies of both of these birds. So we're going to do that by taking out Inspiration from Beyond. So I think this is a pretty okay card in this type of deck. 3 mana, mill 3, then return an instant or sorcery card from our graveyard to our hand. And it doesn't have to be one that we milled over. So even if we whiff on milling, if we have a removal spell in the graveyard, we can bring it back. I think that's pretty solid. But what's better is this. So this is when it enters or attacks, not just attacking, we draw and discard. So that's going to do something similar to this, right? Because it's in our hand, we cast it, it goes out of our hand, and we get another card. So we don't go up in card advantage, it's just 3 mana to maybe get a removal spell back or something. This also isn't card advantage, it's draw, discard, but we can do it every turn. It fills our graveyard up, and then Threshold, it's going to get +1/+1 and Death Touch, and the reason that's good, much like Mind Whisker, it is both a payoff for having Threshold as well as an enabler. So this is going to be our main win condition. Our main plan is mill, get the Threshold, beat down with these flyers. So we're going to take one of these out and then, same thing here, we're going to take one of these out and go up to 4 of the Crow of Dark Tidings. Next, we have Hungry Ghoul, which just doesn't have a place in this deck right now. The only support for this that we even had was the reassembling skeleton, which wasn't great. I suppose we can like sacrifice zombies, then recast them, then sacrifice them, then recast them. And that's the idea. We also have like this reanimation thing. So like there's a little bit of something there. It's just not very good. So what I want to play is another payoff for having a big graveyard, and that's Writhing Necromass. This is a 7 mana 5/5, but it costs 1 less for each creature card in our graveyard. It's very common for this to be like 2 to 3 mana for a 5/5 with Death Touch that can just smack the opponent a bunch. So it's a bit clunkier, I will say. We can't cast it on turn 2 like we can with this, but it does feel pretty good. Next, so we have this very awkward removal spell. It's a 5 mana 5/3 Morbid, so we need a creature to die. It gives a creature -1/-1, but if a creature died, it gives -13. It basically kills a creature. It is 5 mana 5/3, kill a creature. First off, if you want this effect, I would much rather play, I forget the name, it's Fathomless Descent. It's this thing, which is a 4 mana 3/2, gives -X based on the number of permanents in our graveyard. I think this is a much better card. 4 mana for a 3/2 as opposed to a 5 mana for a 5/3 that needs Morbid. This doesn't need Morbid, and our whole point is to fill our graveyard with stuff, but that's not what I want to play. I just want to play just a removal spell. Just a straight up removal spell. 5 mana for 5/3 that might kill something, or just kill something. I just want to kill something. So realistically, it dies a lot in combat. It's not a zombie, it's a spirit, so it doesn't synergize with our zombie stuff, I guess. And I just don't think it's very good. So we're going to take 2 of these out, and we just want to kill stuff. We want to kill stuff, mill, and eventually beat down with flyers. That's my plan. So, similarly, Eaten Alive. So it's awkward. It wants us to sacrifice a creature. Again, if we had more like low-end reanimation stuff, that'd be fine. Or if we were a sacrifice deck, there just wasn't any support for that, and I just don't think it's good enough. There's nothing I really want to sacrifice, and if we don't sacrifice, it's 5 mana. I just don't think that's good enough. So I want to take out one of these and go to 3, go for the throat. And then the other one I want to take out, we just took out those 2 creatures for 2 removal spells. Now I want to take out a removal spell for a creature. I should have done that better. I should have taken out a 5. Well, the point is, we're going to take this out and we're going to go up to 3 of these. They're both clunky. Eaten Alive, we don't often get to actually cast it on one. We're usually paying 5 for it, or we have to sacrifice something that we don't want. It's Eaten Alive. I shouldn't have taken it out because I want to talk about it some more. But Eaten Alive is fine if we have this, because we can sacrifice something, then recast it. That's good. But if we don't have this and we only have 1 copy, not so good. Not such a fan. So, yeah, Writhing Necromass and go for the throat. Just a little bit better. Next, I don't normally change lands, but I want to this time. I think it's worth playing Evolve. Actually, let me just go to lands and type in sacrifice, because there's a few you can play. I want to play one of these, sacrifice a land to go find another land. Evolving Wilds works Terramorphic Expanse works. Fabled Passage works if you have them. They're rare. Check for this first. Check your collection. Put any of these in you have. And then make the rest whatever budget. Terramorphic Expanse or Evolving Wilds. It doesn't matter. Let's add 4 of these. So the reason I want these is because when you sacrifice them, the land goes into the graveyard and counts for Threshold. Both of these enter tapped, right? This enters tapped, this gets a land, enters tapped. Technically a little bit worse because this taps for blue-black the entire game. Once we pick a land, it only taps for that color, so it's slightly worse. In our case, it doesn't really matter because you'll notice that we don't have, if you look at the mana cost, we don't have a lot of double pips. We have Death Baron with double black, but we don't have a lot of like double black and double blue cards. So because of that, it's not terrible. But any land I can sacrifice to get another one, it just increases our threshold. So I think it's worth adding these, and it shouldn't cost wild cards because you probably have some combination. It doesn't matter. Like if you have, let's say you have like 1 Fabled Passage, 2 Terramorphic Expanse, and 1 Evolving Wilds, that works. Whatever combination you have, just take out those tap lands and add these types of lands. These 3 lands, Fabled Passage, Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wilds, put those in. Are there others? I didn't technically look. This one costs mana. I suppose you could play like Demolition Field as well. Either way, I think that improves the deck quite a bit. And I do think it's probably worth, I mentioned it. It's not Ravenous. What's it? Chupacabra. I wish it was Ravenous. Oh boy, do I wish Ravenous Chupacabra was in Standard. I mentioned this earlier. It's pretty good, and I want to take out 2 Deadly Plots for it. So, Deadly Plot, 4 mana, destroys a creature or a planeswalker. That's pretty good, except not really, because it costs 4. And we've added a lot of removal. We have 2 Stabs, which could be cut down, by the way. We have 3 Go for the Throat. We have the Death Touch here. And now we're going to go up 2 more here. But, Deadly Plot, 4 mana, is not very great for removing creatures or planeswalkers. It can also return a zombie from the graveyard to the battlefield, but most of our zombies cost less than 4, so that's actually worse. The only benefit from that is we can pay 4 to reanimate a Necromass, but it's usually cheaper just to cast, and yeah, it's just clunky. So I want this instead. It's a 4 mana 3/2. Target creature an opponent controls gets -X, where X is the number of permanent cards in our graveyard. So a problem I was having with this deck, I wanted to play this, but I kept milling over too many spells, so I think it's worth just going up an extra spells here. I think it's worth taking out 2 of these, adding a couple of these. This brings our creature count to 25, which is pretty good. And that's our sort of tempo deck. Now, there's still some weaker cards. I would say Diregraph Ghoul is borderline useless. It just doesn't do anything, but it's definitely on the weaker side of things, I would say. But in terms of rares that you can add to the deck, the biggest one is in the deck already. Kiora is like the main reason you want to play this type of deck. I mentioned already, cards that do both things are good, right? Things that can get Threshold and give a payoff for Threshold are good. And she's a self-enabler. 3 mana 3/2, when she enters you draw 2, discard 2, so you don't gain card advantage, but you get 2 cards in the graveyard, and filtering. And then Threshold, you get an 8/8, right? So this is huge for this deck. Probably better than Writhing Necromass, probably better than Crow of Dark Tidings, right? I mean, this is cool. It mills 2, but this also sort of mills 2. I mean, you draw 2, discard 2, so it's better than milling because you have some agency in what you discard. So better. It doesn't have flying, but it makes an 8/8, so I would say this is better than Crow. It might even be better than, I mean, it is better than Mind Whisker. Another one would be Overlord of the Balemerc. Oh my god, do I not have any? Okay, I've never unlocked this card, so you can see how much testing I've done with it. But 2 mana, impending 5. When it enters or attacks, you mill 4. There we go, Miller. Then you can return a non-avatar creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Note that it's not among the milled cards. So you mill 4, then any card you bring back. Very good for not only filling the graveyard for Threshold, right? You need 7. This is 4. This is more than halfway to Threshold for 2 mana. And then you can return, like a Writhing Necromass back. You can return, maybe you mill over a Kiora, right? You get to mill and then you just get something really good back. And then in the late game, it's a 5 mana 5/5. That still does that when it enters and every time it attacks. So that's very good. It probably goes in the place of, diagraphical, this as well. Return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. If it's a zombie, you draw, but I'd rather have Overlord. Same 2 mana. I also think there are lots of lands you could think about. We have this one, 4 mana, animates into a 4/4, and when it attacks target player mills, you can target yourself. There's also probably the most important one is Undercity. Tap land, when it enters, you surveil. Better than Temple for sure, but probably just any number of these that you have, just go into place of basics. As you see, I have 2, so I'd take out 1 of each at least and add a couple of these. But surveil, right? So if you see something good, that's great. But if you look at the top card and it's bad, goes into the graveyard, goes towards Threshold. But that's our deck. I think it's much improved. It has a lot of work. You could definitely go way further, get those Kioras in. Any you have. How many do I have? Just to illustrate. I have a playset. Okay, so I could play all 4. Never mind. I was going to be like, oh, look, I have 2. I could add 1 extra. The point is, I'm rambling now. That's the deck, guys. Hopefully that's useful. It's definitely improved. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.